It was 50 years ago that the synthesizer made the leap from obscure academic instrument to incredibly popular musical instrument. And right there at that point was Alan R. Perlman and his company. Alan R. Perlman looked at the synthesizers that were being made at that time and came up with his own ideas about how a synthesizer should be made. He used his own special technical skill and his ideas about interface design to create something so powerful and so potent that it changed the landscape of synthesis in the 1970s and thereby had an incredible effect on synthesizers that we're still even feeling today. So happy anniversary, Alan R. Perlman and ARP.
Happy birthday, Alan. We miss you, but we're keeping your legacy alive.
Happy birthday, Alan. It was an absolute honour to meet you. You know, as a teenager captivated by synth music, I'd always lusted after one, but in the 70s in the UK they were expensive and beyond my reach. Then, after leaving school in 1979, I did a road trip across the US, starting in LA with a view to finishing in Boston. Every stopover was punctuated with either visits to theme parks or music stores where I could get my hands on these amazing instruments. ARPs were everywhere, and I started my trip by learning about the Axe, which then led to the Odyssey, the Pro DGX, the string synthesizer, Omni, and finally the 2600. That trip was life-changing for me, not least that it marked the start of an ARP obsession that continues to this day, evident by Oddity 2, flying to see you for the Bright Sparks documentary, and the lunacy in the GeForce Software Synth Cave, and my home studio. 40 years later, I think I just need one more synth. We can dream, right?
Hi, I'm Jonas from Sweden, and I just want to celebrate the 50th anniversary of ARP instruments and 50 years of ARP's amazing synthesizers. My interest in ARP synthesizers first started when I heard Speak and Spell with Depeche Mode, an album where they used the ARP 2600. I also used the ARP 2600, and I used it for drums, basses, leads, blips, weird noises, you know, all sorts of sounds. Just sounds amazing, a little bit something like this. Again, I just want to say congratulations to 50 years of amazing synthesizers, and I hope you all love your ARPs as much as I do. Take care everyone, bye.
Hi, this is Lisa Belladonna, and I'm an electronic music composer and sound designer, and my journey began with ARP synthesizers. It's how I learned the art of the signal path, and to this day I still have ARP synthesizers in the very center of my studio. It's a huge part of the heart and soul of my own music and process. It inspires me to no end to witness the Alan R. Perlman Foundation taking shape and getting people interested in the history and heritage of just how amazing these instruments are. I'd love to wish Alan R. Perlman a happy birthday and to give all my love to Dina Perlman and the Alan R. Perlman Foundation. Thank you so much. My heart is with you always.
Hey, it's Richard from Retro Synth Ads. One of my earliest memories of a synth is, of course, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That ARP 2500 blew my mind. I didn't even know what a synth was back then, but I was already hooked. Then in the 80s, when my obsession really took off, I was collecting magazines, I was collecting brochures, and of course I was collecting synths. And one of my dreams was to own an ARP. Finally, in the early 90s, I found an ARP Odyssey at a pawn shop, and I picked it up and I was gigging locally with it all through the 90s, and man, those lead lines were crazy. Fast forward 20 years, no longer gigging, but I finally found my real dream, an ARP 2600 locally that needed a good home. And again, it's changed the way I've made music. Anyways, happy 50th anniversary to ARP. And of course, I am so grateful to the Alan R. Perlman Foundation for just keeping that legacy alive. Dina Perlman, you rock. Cheers.
Hello there, this is Panika from Munich, Germany. Happy anniversary to ARP Instruments. I'm one of the lucky ones who owns an original ARP 2600 and I'm still in love with it. Every single time I turn it on, I get goosebumps all over again. It has such a richness and deepness to its sound with all the movements going on. It's a wonderful tool to make music with. And it is also great to learn synthesis on because of all the faders here on the interface. You can instantly see what is going on and all the descriptions over here and make the signal flow very clear. So yeah, perfect interface, wonderful sound. Happy anniversary.
My name is Ian Stair. I'm a composer, sound designer, electronic musician, and keyboard player. My ARP synthesizers have always felt alive to me in a way that almost no other synthesizer has. You can go from singing to screaming with the push of a fader. The Odyssey is in a class of its own. The modulation options and tone sculpting functions are more like what you would expect to find on a modular synthesizer, but in a compact and portable keyboard. It was introduced almost 50 years ago, and it's still as relevant as ever.
Bill T. Miller here at Headroom Studios in Boston, celebrating the life and legacy of Alan R. Perlman and sending out great wishes to his daughter, Dina Perlman, who founded the ARP Foundation, and all the ARP family. My path to a love of ARP synthesizers zigzagged from a toy piano at 2 years old to a Magnus chord organ to an Acetone 60s organ, various encounters with pianos and guitars and drums, and becoming a recording engineer. Ended up at a recording school where I took a synthesizer class in San Francisco, and there was the ARP 2600. Of course I wanted an ARP 2600 the moment I saw it, and then when I heard it and touched it and played with it, I had to have it. Eventually ended up with this ARP Odyssey. As a recording engineer, I've always sought out new and crazy sounds, so synthesizers are perfect for me. Eventually got to pair this ARP Odyssey with an ARP 2600. HBD ARP, thank you so much.
My name's ARP Freak from Amsterdam. 50 years of ARP synthesizers. I guess you can guess where I got my name from. It's one of the most influential brands of synths, and I still use them to this day. And I hope to make a lot of music with these amazing machines, way up until the future.
50 years of ARP. I've only had involvement for one of those 50 years, but that's enough to understand that this is a story of science, technology, engineering, ingenuity, and of course music, art, design, education, and much more. And whilst that didn't always work out, that's part of the story too. This isn't some plasticky fairy tale. You have to walk down those dead ends in order to find those doorways to new worlds. And doing that once in your lifetime would be something to be immensely proud of. But ARP had the people with the right minds and the right skills to do that time and time again. And that's why we're still talking about it 50 years later. And that's why the instruments are still played and loved and cherished and even remade. So to the Perlmans and to the wider ARP family, congratulations and happy 50th.
Hi folks, it's David Frederick, and I wanted to wish Al, Dina, and ARP synthesizers a very happy 50th anniversary. You know, for me, ARP synthesizers are more than just tools I've used in my film and television scoring work. They're family. If you know me, you probably know my father, Dave Sr. My dad was one of the original pioneers at ARP synthesizers and was responsible for some of the most iconic synths to come out of the company. So as a 4-year-old kid, being exposed to 2600s, Pro Soloist, Odysseys, and not only the instruments, but also being exposed to tremendous musicians like Mike Brigida, Tom Pickett, Don Lewis, my dad, gave me a very unique perspective and family connection to ARP synthesizers. So I want to wish ARP a very happy 50th anniversary, and here's to 50 more years of making amazing music with ARP synthesizers.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Doak, and I would just like to say a few words in support of the Alan R. Perlman ARP archives. I am fortunate in that the synthesizer has been my passion, has provided an outlet for my creativity, and has allowed me to enjoy a distinguished career as a musician, a salesman, a sound programmer, a product manager, an instrument designer, and as a copywriter. I had the pleasure of growing up in New England, where it seemed the synthesizer and electronic music in general was a cottage industry, what with companies such as Aries Modular, DVX, Electronic Music Laboratories, Novaline, Synair, and others, including, of course, ARP. In fact, the first synthesizer I ever used in the recording studio was an ARP Axe. I was 17 years old. Later, as a student, as a teacher, and as a performer, I became enamored of the ARP 2600. The versatility, accessibility, and the quality of the sound was second to none. In my early 20s, I was lucky enough to purchase this ARP Quadra. This was my main keyboard as a live performer during the New York New Wave heyday in the 1980s. I had seen the instrument demonstrated a few years earlier by Mike Brigida and Tom Pigott, and just had to have one. As with the 2600, the design and implementation of the ARP Quadra was remarkable. During our live performances back in the day, the Quadra bass section would be slave to a sequencer, the lead section would drive an external synthesizer, and the string section would continually feed a vocoder. The Quadra had a wealth of hidden features. I still love and use my Quadra to this day. 5 years ago, I had the instrument repaired and restored to its former glory, operationally if not cosmetically. The point is, great people make great synthesizers. Alan Perlman's contributions to my chosen industry are outstanding, and ARP instruments deserve all of their iconic status. They remain more than just touchstones on the synthesizer timeline, and that's why I'm happy to lend my support to the Alan R. Perlman ARP archives. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jim Heinz. I created Time Warp 2600, which is an emulation of the classic ARP 2600 synthesizer. Can sure have a lot of fun with these things. I created the Time Warp 2600 out of necessity more than out of a desire to build a product. I just wanted an ARP 2600, and at the time I couldn't afford one. So I built one, and I kept working on it until it was right. I have spoken to so many famous people and so many different people from around the world. I mean, I remember the day Gershon Kingsley called me, the author of the song Popcorn. One day he just called out of the blue. Another day, Carrie Livgren from Kansas called. And another time I spoke to a member of the Oak Ridge Boys. Another time I spoke to Joe Zawinul, one of my all-time heroes. These people were all attached to this instrument. Pete Townsend is another person who's reached out to me. Mark Mothersbaugh from the band Devo. is a close friend now. These instruments are so musical and so playable, and they cut through the mix. They sound great. I feel honored to have opened the door, in a way, to a future generation of people to fall in love with Alan R. Perlman's work.
When I moved up to Boston late in 1970 with my new wife and my newer daughter to write the owner's manual for the new ARP 2600 synthesizer, everything and everyone I encountered was new and strange. And in fact, this move turned out to be effectively the beginning of my life as an adult. The people I encountered during this period, Dennis Colin, Jeremy Hill, Clark Ferguson, Phil Dodds, were part of my life for years to come as friends and as business acquaintances. Alan Perlman and I had gotten acquainted at the 1970 New York AES show, where his company, called Tonus at the time, had demonstrated their new integrated suitcase synthesizer, the 2600. This became my life for the next 10 years. Alan and I shared a real love of music, with or without synthesizers, and he funded several of my ventures of the with synthesizers sort. And when I undertook to start the Boston School of Electronic Music in 1972, he supported and promoted it among musicians and composers he knew. The Israeli composer Tzvi Avni was one of his referrals. It was during that period that I took the first steps into the interests and activities that have dominated my life ever since. BSEM ended in 1979 with a disastrous fire, and ARP Instruments ended in 1981. I survived on some skills in software engineering that I had acquired as part of my curriculum expansion efforts for BSEM during the later 70s. Those skills became my living for the next 2 decades. Alan and I fell out of touch. Around 2004, Jim Heinz of Way Out Where invited me to write a new owner's manual for his software emulation of the ARP 2600, modeled on the original publication from 1970. His software got, and deserved, rave reviews, and he sold it as the Time Warp 2600. Way Out Where's promotion and marketing efforts brought Alan and I together once again in planning and discussion sessions. That was decidedly a good time. We hadn't been much in contact during the intervening years, but I had very good memories of his support during the ARP and BSEM years. That was the Alan I knew at ARP Instruments, and the Alan whom I saw again when we reconnected. One of his endearing mannerisms in conversation was to finish a statement by making a facial gesture rather than words. The point was obviously that words alone were incapable of carrying his intended meaning, and it always worked. He was, after all, a musician as much as he was an engineer. Alan experienced life intensely, and life for him was not just the physics and engineering he made his career out of, but the people around him and their music and their instruments. It was all one playground.
those sweet sounds from ARP was my first instrument of choice when the synthesizer revolution started. And thanks to Alan R. Perlman, we have seen the changes and the wonderful insights and creativity that has come from the sounds that we've been able to create with the ARP instruments. I was very much moved when I first heard the ARP. And my setup here, Leo, a third of it is ARP, two 2600s and a pro soloist. And I'm so grateful that this talented man gave to us the technology to create so many different sounds and music. Thank you so much, Alan.
Hello, my name is Michael Birillo, and I'm the chair of the Electronic Production and Design Department at Berklee College of Music. ARP instruments have been part of the DNA of Berklee and what we have done with electronic music since the 1970s, when we had the first ARP 2500s that we used to teach electronic music. Throughout the years, we've had all sorts of ARP instruments, the 2600, the Odysseys. We even had ARP avatars. On top of that, we've had people closely related to ARP working with us. One of our key faculty members, Michael Brigida, worked for ARP for many years. Richard Boulanger was a protege of Alan Perlman's and a close friend, as was David Mash. So through the years, we've had some pretty close connections with ARP. And in 2013, we hosted the Everything ARP Symposium, and we brought in some people from the early days of ARP, Tom Pigott and Dave Fredericks, and we had a number of panels and discussions about different aspects of ARP. Alan was there, and we interviewed Alan, and I think one of the big takeaways of that symposium was really the dedication that Alan had to education, to music education, and really that was part of the mission, I think, of ARP. I think we think in many ways of the key artists, the signature artists that are associated with ARP instruments. But in many ways, I think one of the missions of ARP instruments was to really kind of bring music education about electronic music into the schools. So on this Alan Perlman's birthday, we wish you happy birthday, Mr. Perlman, and congratulations to the ARP Foundation, and many more years to come of our relationship with ARP and the Foundation.
In 1972, my music store was typical of many, selling guitars, drums, toots, and flutes. It was my personal interest in technology that same year that led me to become an ARP dealer and player. I'll never forget taking home that first ARP Odyssey after it arrived. After spending a sleepless night learning, the planet seemed to shift on its axis. My fascination became a skill, and my world was never the same. My experience with and passion for ARP synthesizers changed the fortunes of my business, made me an in-demand studio musician, and forever changed the trajectory of my career. I owe a never-ending gratitude to Alan R. Perlman and so many at ARP who made so much magic possible.
Join us on a journey to the uttermost limits of the galaxy aboard the useless Enterprise. Ahead 1 Factor 1, Mr. Studio.
Hi everybody,
This is Bill Singer. I used to be the product specialist for the ARP Avatar. What you were just listening to was a little recording that Mike Bridget and I had done in Mike's basement. Of course, that was back in the 70s. Most of the lead lines were the ARP Avatar, and Mike, I believe, was playing the Quadra, an Axe, an Odyssey, a 2600. I was using an ARP Avatar to plug it into a 2600. One of my fondest memories of Alan Perlman was when I was in the studio practicing, and I had hooked up the 2600 to the Avatar, and I had found that wonderful, wonderful string patch that was one of the trademarks of the 2600. And on the Avatar, it was a brass unison patch. Well, I was kind of off in my own little world, dark in studio, and I was getting all kinds of nice little lead lines, flowing melodies and things. And as I said, I was lost in my own little musical world. And I happened to look into one of the darkened corners of the studio, and there was Alan Perlman standing there. And I stopped playing. I said, "Hi, Al, how are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm fine." He said, "You know, I was going by here, and I could have sworn it was John Chaikin playing." And I took that as a wonderful, wonderful compliment, because John Chaikin is one of the finest keyboardists that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. Well, guys, happy anniversary to ARP, 50 years. I am so sad that it was so short-lived, but its legacy and Al's legacy will forever live on. God bless you, Al, and God bless all the people that I worked with at the beginning.
Hi, I'm Rich Formidoni. I first got the chance to meet Alan R. Perlman a few years ago during the rebirth of ARP and the development of this guy. I was the one who got to go to his home to propose the idea to him personally, and I was very nervous to do that because I was in awe of this great man, this pioneer, and he was extremely kind and just wonderful to talk to. And when he let me in, he told me that he had just finished disassembling and reassembling a watch to make it work more efficiently. So what people say about him is true. His mind was going a million miles a minute. He was always looking for solutions to problems, and he was always playing piano too. He played beautifully for me while I was there, and just a sweet, kind-hearted, wonderful guy. So it was nice now, 50 years later, after the development of the first ARP synth, to be able to match all that wonderful, rich history and legacy up with knowing what a great guy Alan R. Perlman actually turned out to be. And now I'm extremely honored to be serving on the board of the Alan R. Perlman Foundation, where we're trying to preserve that legacy. Alan, we love you. We miss you. Happy birthday.
virus outbreak.
Appropriately social distance.
Spouting political
The number of new cases
buses, workplace density.
Today is day 64.